Thank you. Gee, I wish I could bound off on the platform as lightly as you do. A few years ago, I used to do that. Hi, folks. Thank you for being here. Got your video recorders running, I'm sure. I was going to share some ideas about guilt this week, but I decided to do that next week. So save your guilt, and we'll talk about it next. I want to share some ideas and something else, but first, some mirth moments. This is a quasi-religious funny. 2 priests decided to go to Hawaii on vacation, and they really wanted to make this a true vacation. And so they were not going to wear anything that would identify them as members of the clergy. So when the plane landed in Honolulu there, they went straight to the store and bought some really outrageous speech outfits. And of course, they went out to sit on the beach there, Waikiki, and this beautiful, beautiful woman walked by, fantastic, headed for the beach, in what is euphemistically called beach attire. And as she passed the 2 priests, she said to them, "Good morning, Father. Good morning, Father," nodding and addressing each one of them individually as she passed. They were both stunned. They had glasses on and everything. How in the world did she know they were priests? So the next day they went back to the store and they bought even more outrageous outfits. And once again, in their new attire, they settled down in their chairs to enjoy the sunshine. After a little while, this fabulous, fabulous woman comes by and she nods them again and says, "Good morning, Father, good morning, Father," and starts to walk away. But one of the priests couldn't stand this any longer. And he said, "Just a minute, young lady." "Yes, Father. We are priests, and we're proud of it. But I have to know, how in this world did you know we're priests, dressed or undressed as we are?" And she replied, "Father, it's me, Sister Kathleen." Sorry, it was bad, but I've had worse. So keep them coming. That came from a member of our congregation who shall remain nameless. You realize when you give me these stories, you put your entire reputation in my hands, but I promise not to name you. This is a little holy humor. During these serious and troubled times, people of all faiths should remember 4 great religious truths. Muslims do not recognize Jews as God's chosen people. Jews do not recognize Jesus as the Messiah. Protestants do not recognize the Pope as the leader of the Christian world. And Baptists do not recognize each other in the liquor store. A Sunday school teacher asked Johnny, "Do you think Noah did a lot of fishing when he was on the ark?" "That's stupid," replied Johnny. "How could he with just 2 worms?" That kid will go far. And 2 things little girls have learned. Mothers have 3 eyes, 2 in front and 1 behind. Never ask Mom to brush your hair after she's had a row with Dad. Okay, let's have some ideas. When I was a little boy, and I was a little boy, I think once, my dad managed a couple of theaters. And I grew very used to show people. I grew up amongst them. Wonderful, wonderful people. Absolutely wonderfully talented folk. And yet not always entirely kind to one another when they meet in assembly together at a party after the show or something of that sort. And I kept pestering my dad. I said, "I want to come to one of these parties, one of these cocktail parties they were, after the show." And he said one time, "Okay, you can come on down." The theater was called the Hippodrome Theater for some reason. And he said, "You can stand behind this screen And, you can peep out once in a while, but this is an adult party, and, it's not really for little boys, so you stay pretty much out of sight. And I was listening to a group of ladies at the stage, and they were chattering away here, and the star of the show made an appearance. You never walk in, obviously, when you should, if you are the star of something. You make what is called an entrance. Everybody knows this. So you're late, a few minutes late. And so the star of the show walked in. I would have called her, in Navy parlance, a triple-decker. She was fantastic. She was absolutely stunning. I was shocked as a little boy to see this magnificence. And she said, "Darlings, darlings, you are wonderful, oh darlings." And these 2 or 3 women who were standing there together near my little screen of concealment, they said, "She's not sincere. She really is a hypocrite and a whited sepulchre." And I thought, gee, it hadn't occurred to me that this magnificent figure could be something that I didn't understand or had never heard named. So when I got home, as you can imagine, being a somewhat forward child, I decided that I would look up the words sepulchre and hypocrite, which I did. And I discovered to my amazement that a sepulchre is a place where old bones are kept. And I couldn't imagine that this magnificent figure, whom I had seen an hour or 2 earlier, could have anything to do with a place where old bones were kept. And then I looked up, with great difficulty, I looked up this notion of hypocrisy and discovered that in the Greek language, hypocrite means mask. The hypocrites, the Hippocrates, are the masks of tragedy and comedy that the ancient Greek actors used to wear on stage. And so I had a job to apply these 2 terms to this woman. But later on, when I did read the Bible, which I did, I came across this passage, which we're probably familiar with, from Matthew, the 23rd chapter, where Jesus is in denunciatory mood. We have this idea of little Jesus, meek and mild, with those pictures that we saw in Sunday school of this incredibly benign, otherworldly figure, usually recognizably Nordic in appearance, but certainly of great benign temperament. Of course, the fact is that Jesus, when he was riled up, like the rest of us, he spoke out. That was his truth when the moment came, and he spoke it unafraid. And he's addressing the men of the law, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, those men, and they were all men, those men who interpreted the Jewish law. And they were interpreting that law in an increasingly narrow fashion. They weren't allowing for human frailties or spiritual growth. They had become so legalistic in their thinking that there was no room there for the kind of compassion that Jesus exercised in his understanding of the human condition. So he denounces them. After all, he is a prophet, and he denounces them. He says, "Alas for you, men of the law! You are like whited sepulchres, covered with whitewash. They look well from the outside, but inside they're full of dead men's bones. And so it is with you. Outside you look like honest men, but inside you are brimful of hypocrisy." He uses those 2 words, sepulchre and hypocrisy. And you can understand, if you understand Jesus, why he is so exercised by this vision of concealment and hypocrisy. When you understand the message of any great spiritual or religious teacher, think of the Buddha if you wish, their desire is to reach and express and to help others reach and express some beautiful truth within themselves that they'll be able to convey. They want people, the majority, they want people to express something of their God nature. And yet we do move through life, all of us, from time to time in this inhibited fashion that Jesus condemns. There's no correspondence between the two, the true within as he sees it, and our outward activity, the words that come from our mouths. We wear those masks of concealment, the Hippocrates, the masks of concealment, and we don't speak our wonderful spiritual truth. And Jesus was very concerned with what we today call authenticity. How to be an authentic, a real human being. How are we to discover and practice authenticity in our lives? How do we avoid being hypocrites? How do we avoid being whited sepulchres, containing all those miserable, unhappy thoughts within ourselves and never reaching that internal light that he believed was present so that we may help it to shine through us? How do we do this? Well, it's a learning process, like any other process in life. Robert Browning, the great Victorian poet, the late 19th century, mid-19th century, he said we need to open a way through which the imprisoned splendor may escape. We need to open a way through which the imprisoned splendor in us may escape, enabling us to speak those words of love and encouragement to our fellow human beings. And yet, so much of the pressure in our society drives us to be more and more conservative in our understanding of what it means to live socially in the kind of world that we inhabit. Do you realize that before the First World War, 80% of people in this country lived on farms? And they had a very different kind of a life. Some of you may say, oh, that must have been a very confining life with very limited horizons. Maybe that was true in many instances. But there always seems to be a ring of greater authenticity about those lives. And when we look at the kind of lives that we lead today, we see that so many, many times we don't have an opportunity to develop and to express who we truly are, to experience the nature of our actual identity. Now, one of the reasons we're afraid to do this is because, alas, we've been taught for generations that there's something evil within us. So we've got to be very careful about how far we reach into ourselves. We might uncover nasty things that we don't want to know about. Maybe Freud's id is lurking in there somewhere, or the crocodile brain. Maybe that's in there somewhere, the brain that we inherited assumedly from our crocodilian ancestors. Well, you can believe that if you want, but we've come a long way since those days anyway. But unity, I think, is somewhat unusual in that it believes that as you strip away the layers of falsity and denial and hypocrisy, you will find not increasing anger, frustration, bitterness, corruption. You will find more wisdom, light, understanding, and joy. It's a wonderful philosophy understood in this way. And I believe Jesus understood it, and the Apostle Paul too. They understood that though there was hypocrisy in our natures, although we conceal all the time, nevertheless, at heart, there's something in there that wants out. There's something in there that is telling us you are creatures of light and joy and fulfillment. Don't limit yourselves to a two-dimensional existence. Enjoy the world. Open yourself to experience and share this light that you have. And that involves trying to be authentic. That's what our psychiatrists and psychologists call for now. They call upon us to live authentic lives. Lives that mirror something greater within ourselves and encompass more of experience, so that we're not driven constantly to become narrower and narrower and narrower. We need to open ourselves to experience. We need to open ourselves to others. We need to live that kind of life that will show us these added horizons that are contained within ourselves. I had an interesting experience just just a few years ago, as a matter of fact, and I'm going to share it with you now, even though it's a fairly intimate experience, because I think it tells me something about what we might be considering as we look for this ability to expand our understanding and our natures. I had a half-brother by the name of Jerry. We called him Jerry. And he was older than I was. He's passed now. He was older than I was. And Jerry and I, he was married, and Jerry and I, once in a while, we would correspond. You know, we were half-brothers, sons of the same mother, but we were never close. And we would correspond from time to time. And then there was a period of 3 or 4 years when I hadn't heard from Jerry. And I think I called him up one day, or I sent him a note, and he didn't respond. So I sent him another note after a while, asking him why he hadn't bothered to respond to me. And eventually a letter came saying, well, come over and visit me. He lived on an island. He said, come over and visit me. He said, well, you can stay for a couple of nights in the local hotel. He just had a tiny apartment. His wife had died. And I said, okay, I'll come on over. But he said, be very cautious. He said, you won't recognize me. He said, I'm not being a hypocrite anymore. And I thought, okay, all right. He was always a little withdrawn, shall I say. He was a difficult personality to understand, always very, very inhibited, and one felt he could never let anybody in. There were so many defenses there that you felt you could never reach the authentic Jerry. It wasn't available to you. So I thought, okay, you know, this is a man now in his early 70s when this happened. I said, okay, Jerry, I'll come over. I had some spare time. I left Carol at home. I took the plane and flew down to the island there. Well, I couldn't fly to the island. I had to fly to the mainland, take the ferry. And he'd already warned me that I would be somewhat shocked. I thought, well, you know, I haven't seen him for 25 years or so. He's bound to have aged. Of course I'm going to be shocked. And I took a cab to his little apartment there, and the door opened, and Jerry was a woman. About 10 years, 12 years. And he was not what sometimes people called a transvestite. He wasn't interested in dressing in women's clothes. He was not a cross-dresser. Nothing wrong with that. But he had actually changed his gender. And we sat down. I got over the initial shock. He said, well, I thought you wouldn't understand. I thought you'd be upset. I thought you'd be angry. You know, you wouldn't, you just cuss me out or whatever. I said, Jerry, why would I do that? You found who you truly are. It was a profoundly moving thing. He really was. He'd always wanted to be a woman. He was one of those people who feels that they are in the wrong body and they're the wrong gender. And he said, I no longer feel a hypocrite. I'm living my truth. I'm living my real life. I'm not hurting anybody by doing this. I'm surprising a few people, which is absolutely true. To put it bluntly, he made a very sweet little old lady. But he was happy there. That was what he was. And so he lived on for 3 or 4 more years here, and I saw him a couple of times, but after that, and then he passed away. But the wonderful thing was that he had the courage to express himself in this way. And I think more of us need to release our inner concerns, our inner joys. Now, we have to be very careful. Obviously, we have to be extremely careful not to upset others when we do this. We don't want to be cruel or unkind. No, of course not. The true revelation, the true authenticity, the true revelation of being doesn't involve hurting other people. No, of course it doesn't. It involves, if anything, drawing them up rather than pushing them down. I have seen so many people over the years who have told me that they're living hypocritical lives. They're not really themselves. They're not really what they want to be. Life has never given them, they say, the opportunity to truly express who they really are. And then when you begin to talk to them more, they say, I know I have more within me. I know I've got more. There's a presence within me, and I have never been able to express that. And sometimes they learn how to do that, how to speak out, how to reveal more of themselves. I'm not advocating gender change, for heaven's sake, but if that's what you want, and it doesn't hurt anybody, why not? But the point of the matter is, many of us do live limited and, without being unkind, hypocritical lives. We've got those masks on all the time. This is not really me. I'm not really being authentic with you. Even when I tell you I love you, I don't really. And when you tell me that you love me, what is it the truth? Is that your truth? Are you really expressing that? Or is this another evasion? We're so full of evasions. Our lives are so full of evasions. And the tragedy is that so many times in our society, driven as we are, driven by the need to make money or to preserve ourselves, these are all vastly pressing needs. We don't have time to develop the beauty of the soul, to let it, in Browning's words, escape that imprisoned splendor. We live cramped lives that don't allow us to become authentic. Now, this message, this notion, these ideas may not, what is that awful expression we use today? Resonate with all of you. But it has resonated with me. It's meant something to me. Because over the years, and I believe with Carol too, we've tried to present an authenticity to the world. In other words, what you get is probably what you get. This is us. Most of the time. Now, we all have our evasions, and we lie to ourselves just as we often tell little fibs to other people. There's a big distinction between lies and fibs. You do know that, don't you? My mother was very, very precise on that point. She said, never lie, but sometimes a little fib is okay because it preserves somebody else's self-worth. So, there's a difference between a lie and a fib. But we're great at lying to ourselves, folks. We really are, about what we are and how we truly feel. If there is anything in this whole idea about spiritual liberation, if there really is a truth to the assertion that we make, that there is a greater presence within ourselves, an eternal good within ourselves, doesn't it behoove us in some way to try and discover that and to let it flow in our lives, to share with others supportive words, positive notions, ideas? I think there's a question being asked of us all the time. How real are you? How authentic are you? Are you just a whited sepulchre filled with dead bones, the death that our ideals have undergone over the years, and we've just buried them away, and they become a part of a sour personality? Are we hypocrites? Are we just wearing false faces and false fronts all the time? Or is there any possibility that we can be real? Real for ourselves, real for others. Take the risk of being real people. Well, these are ideas, folks. What I try to do on these Sunday mornings together is not teach anybody anything. God forbid. If there's any truth in anything that I've said, if there's any objective merit in it, I would have you come to it on your own and use these ideas just to think about your life and what it represents. Life is a precious, precious gift. We must not waste it. We must realize that we are called upon to let it blossom in the fullest possible way. We must be authentic. We must not, as Jesus said, be whited sepulchres or hypocrites. Let's take the bones out and throw them away, and let's remove the masks, and let's be our true selves. And let's show the world the glory of Spirit in all its beauty in us. Idea. It's an idea, isn't it? It's an idea. Yeah. Should we do a forum again sometime? Would you like to do that? Okay. I'll try and fit one in next month. Then if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them, because this is a thinking person's church, folks. This is not a place where you come to be told how to behave and what dogmas and doctrines to follow. This is a place where you come to help release your own inner splendor. And I pray that you have discovered this wonderful, wonderful possibility within yourselves. Now I'm going to sit down.